Between the year 1900 and 1964, over 800 people were hanged in the UK. But some of these long-standing convictions could have been a miscarriage of justice.
They got no evidence. They're just trying to haul anybody in for it.
Barristers Sasha Wass and Jeremy Dean have been investigating these life-changing cases as they teamed up with living relatives, desperate to clear their family name.
She had everything to lose. I really can't believe Mother done such a thing to father.
Together, they investigated the convictions.
There's a stench about this. Probably wouldn't even be admissible in the modern time.
He has the opportunity to kill her, he has the weapons to kill her, and we know that they've had contact beforehand.
And reassessed the evidence using modern forensic techniques.
The findings on it are really quite instructive. There was no blood inside the hammer.
Before they submitted their findings to a Crown Court judge, who determined whether the conviction was safe or could have been a miscarriage of justice.
I'm here today to consider, with the help of learned counsel, the safety of the conviction.
Now, as we reunite the barristers and the family members for the first time, we'll be finding out exactly what happened next. Was justice finally served? And are the unexplained cases finally closed? Today, Jeremy and Sasha are reopening the casebook on a crime that broke a family apart. A poisoned husband and a wife sent to the gallows.
Jeremy, this was the most emotional case that we did. I mean, 5 children lost both their parents. But what intrigued me most about it was whether there had been previous attempts at poisoning.
What I found most interesting, Sasha, is that the police were unable to attribute any motive to the defendant for this murder. In fact, it's impossible to see why she might have wanted to kill her husband, and that's a feature of the case that deeply concerns me.
But nobody had a motive that the police were able to present.
The question is whether the police properly investigated the case, because there was at least one alternative suspect whom I don't believe the police looked into properly at all.
We're going to meet the family members later, but before we do, let's remind ourselves of the facts of this case.
On the 22nd of December 1935, Frederick Bryant became ill after supper, complaining of severe stomach pains. Fred was brought to the nearest hospital in Sherborne, but it was too late. He died within hours. It looked like a simple case of gastroenteritis, but it was discovered that Fred's body contained high levels of arsenic. It seemed Fred had been poisoned. Suspicion immediately fell on Fred's wife, Charlotte. On the 10th of February 1936, Charlotte was arrested and charged with the murder of her husband. By May, she was facing a judge and a jury of 12 men. She was found guilty and sentenced to death. Charlotte Bryant was executed on Wednesday, the 15th of July 1936 at Exeter Jail. Now 80 years later, Charlotte's son William and her grandson David are desperate to learn the truth.
Charlotte Bryant was my grandmother. I didn't know who my grandmother was until I was in my mid-30s. Do you remember when you first told me?
Yeah.
Father's Day, driving along.
That's right.
All of the family in the car.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing a skid, I think, when you told me.
It was only with Mum prompted me. She said, you've got to tell them.
With their father murdered and their mother hanged, the 5 Bryant children were put into an orphanage and told nothing of the crime.
The first I knew was when I read it in the paper in 1964. Up until then, I knew nothing whatsoever. It was completely out of the blue. I couldn't really believe what I was reading.
How do you feel about going through all of the case with this, Dad?
Just a bit nervous about it all.
It'll be a fantastic result if the barristers actually
absolutely
identify that there's been a miscarriage of justice.
That would make my day. That would, yeah. although I never knew Mother at all, I would like to think she was innocent. That would be a nice, well, fairy tale ending.
Charlotte went to her death claiming her innocence. But can a modern legal team discover the truth? Jeremy Dean QC has been a defence barrister for over 30 years, specialising in serious crime. Examining this case for the prosecution is Sasha Was QC, who has a particular interest in cases based on medical or scientific evidence. David has travelled to London to meet the barristers who will be reinvestigating his grandmother's case.
Hello, Jeremy. Hello, Jeremy. Very pleased to meet you.
Hello, David. Sasha.
Hello,
Hi.
Sasha.
Hi.
Hello there.
My role is to look at your grandmother's case from the point of view of a defence lawyer and hopefully to identify new grounds on which to reopen the case.
I'm looking at this case from the prosecution perspective, but that doesn't mean I'm approaching this in order to uphold these convictions at all costs. Quite the opposite. If new material comes to light that throws doubt onto the conviction of your grandmother, I will put that forward before the judge in order that the right conclusion is reached.
Why is it important to you now to establish, if it wasn't her, that that's the case?
I think it would be closure for the family. My father, it's turned his life upside down, and I think it would be good for the family to know and understand it so that we can move on.
Let's say the case got stronger. You're ready for that turn of events.
Certainly, we've talked through that with my father, and I think the chance is worth taking for us.
So we will let you know how we get on.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
OK.
David's grandmother, Charlotte, was born in 1903. She met Frederick Bryant while he was on a tour of duty in her homeland of Northern Ireland, and she accompanied him when he returned to England. The couple married in Somerset in 1922. As an outsider in the tight-knit farming community in Sherborne, Dorset, where they settled, Charlotte was viewed with suspicion. Rumours began to circulate that the young Irish woman was entertaining local men for money. Fred Bryant had suffered from stomach complaints on several occasions in the months leading up to his death. The labourer often handled arsenic in his work on the farm, but it was alleged that his death was the result of deliberate poisoning.
This is not a strong case. She was hanged for the murder of her husband on what can only be described as highly circumstantial evidence. The starting point for me is that her character played a major part in the trial. She was portrayed as a lowlife, someone without any morals. By way of starting point, that is a really dangerous platform for the case to proceed on.
This case was very thin indeed. Effectively, the prosecution relied largely on a vilification of her character and wouldn't be allowed nowadays.
What motive could Charlotte have had for killing her husband? The prosecution suggested that it was Charlotte's affection for her lodger, Leonard Parsons.
Certainly, Charlotte had had an affair with Leonard Parsons under the nose of her husband, who didn't seem to care at all. That was over well before December 1935. And Charlotte made it plain in court she was not interested in having a life with him. So I don't see the motive, which was put forward by the prosecution, as being violent.
Yeah, it's not just the absence of motive. She knew that she'd be much worse off by killing him. She'd have lost her house and ended up in the workhouse. So, in fact, the evidence militates in the opposite direction. That's a matter of real concern, isn't it?
Yes, I agree. I agree.
The barristers have already thrown doubt on Charlotte's potential motive. The verdict in 1936, however, had a devastating impact on the 5 Bryant children, as William is all too aware. He and David have returned to the orphanage he called home.
Which was your bedroom?
I was in this end first. This is the junior end. I can't remember whether it was there or that angle, but that's all dormitory up there.
Right.
And there would have been at least 50 boys in there, yeah.
This photograph would have been you on the day that you got brought in, Dad. And that's you.
That's me.
Yeah.
That's Uncle Eric.
Yeah.
About Sam, as I knew him. Auntie Mary, as I knew her. And Uncle George.
Right.
And that was Bobby.
Right.
I call them those names because that's how I knew them.
Yeah, yeah.
Nothing else, you know.
Whatever the truth about the murder, the Bryant siblings' lives were catastrophically changed forever.
Because Mary and Eric were older, so they were put into the senior girls, senior boys. But Bobby went over that side because the nursery was that side.
Right, OK.
But me being my age, I was put in juniors, and from that time on, I really never saw them again.
No.
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 William and his siblings were never adopted and spent their entire childhoods in the orphanage.
The reason he was here, their father being murdered and then their mother hanging, it absolutely ripped the family apart.
Medical experts at the time were convinced that Fred's illnesses had been caused by deliberate arsenic poisoning. The Bryant property was searched, and a selection of old tins and bottles were found, including a burnt-out tin that would become very significant to the investigation.
Jeremy, the next thing we really ought to look at is the cause of death, because the pathologist found arsenic in Fred Bryant's body. And the prosecution case was not that this was accidental, but that Charlotte deliberately administered poison. Now, the only person who said that Charlotte had anything to do with arsenic was Lucy Osler, a friend. And she said that there was a tin of weed killer, and after Fred had died, Charlotte said, I must get rid of it. Now, in order to bolster up Lucy's account, the prosecution retrieved a tin. It's the middle tin that was retrieved from the fireplace. Prosecution tried to say, well, look, it matches weed killer. We really need to look at that.
The thing is, all of this is highly technical. So it's very important that we look at all of these questions very thoroughly. It may be that that's the way we can take the case forward.
David and his father, William, are visiting the farmhouse in Dorset where Charlotte and Frederick lived with their 5 young children. William has not set foot inside the house in over 80 years.
And look, see the chimney's still there, look, still the same chimney. Yeah. Coming back to the house, I can't remember very much about it. There were 7 of us living there, mother and father, 5 children. So there must have been quite a squash with only 2 bedrooms.
Despite the limited living space, Charlotte and Fred took in guests on occasion. Leonard Parsons lodged with the family until November 1935, and Lucy Ostler, Charlotte's close friend, stayed at the cottage on the night before Fred died.
Even though I didn't realise it, it's a very important site in my family's history, because the fact that an incident happened here, whether it was natural causes or whether it was a murder, it put my father and all of his brothers and sister into the Muller orphanage, and it then started a completely different life than they ever thought they were going to have.
One of the key witnesses who helped to link Charlotte to the possession of arsenic was her best friend, Lucy Ostler. But Jeremy has some doubts about the truth of her statements.
Lucy Ostler gave some very, very damaging evidence. She said that Charlotte went to the cupboard and on the bottom shelf she saw a large tin marked weed killer. She said that Charlotte picked it up and said, quote, I must get rid of this. Why did Lucy Ostler give this evidence, and what reason might she have had for lying?
Well, I can help you, because looking at the transcript of her evidence at trial, it was put to her that she was frightened when she spoke to the police. And what Charlotte's counsel said is that the police were questioning you, were they not? Yes, said Lucy. Did you know they were digging around your husband's grave? No. She's then asked about her husband, who had died some 4 years previously, and that there was some sort of suggestion that the police were pressurising Lucy and threatening her with looking into her husband's premature death. And it was a result of that pressure that Lucy came up with this account about that tin.
On the basis of that information, Lucy Osler clearly had a motive for lying about Charlotte Bryant. So this is potentially a very important area for us to focus on.
Yes, I think so, because other than Lucy Osler, there is no connection between Charlotte Bryant and any arsenic.
Can modern forensic science sift through the evidence to dispute Charlotte's guilty verdict? Jeremy and Sasha enlist medical historian Sandra Hempel to look at the use of arsenic in this era.
What did it look like? I mean, what sort of form would it be in?
Well, when they talk about arsenic as a poison, they actually mean arsenic trioxide, and that's a very harmless-looking white powder.
Can you taste it? I mean, if you accidentally have some arsenic in a spoonful of sugar, would you know that?
No, you really wouldn't.
And how easy is it, would it be for someone to be poisoned accidentally? Might he have, you know, over the years absorbed or consumed so much arsenic as to, you know, die of arsenic poisoning without any deliberate effort to kill him?
In theory, he could. I think it's very, very unlikely, because it's very unlikely that he will be the only person.
Have you come across cases of accidental death by arsenic?
Not from the environment in that very long, slow, drawn-out process, which is what it would be.
Right.
Fred suffered repeated incidents of vomiting and diarrhea, along with muscle cramps, all classic symptoms of exposure to arsenic. Now that they know that it's unlikely that Fred's work as a farmhand would have been the cause of his fatal arsenic consumption, Jeremy and Sasha have asked toxicologist David Osselton to assist them in analysing the cause of Fred's death.
You've seen the post-mortem report. What are your feelings about the conclusions drawn in that report?
Arsenic was detected in a number of the tissues, and put together with all of the case circumstances, the analyst at the time, Dr. Rush Lynch, came up with the conclusion that this was death by arsenic poisoning.
And do you agree with that?
Certainly the presence of high concentrations of arsenic and some of the signs and symptoms that were observed would fit that diagnosis, yes.
We know from the pathologist's report that 4 grains of arsenic, as it's been described, was recovered from Fred's body. In terms of modern weights and measures, what is a grain?
A grain is approximately 65 milligrams.
Right. So not something that could be ingested just by maybe having contact with the surface and then putting it in your mouth?
Oh, no. It would definitely be a quantity that was introduced into the body.
Following on from that, the tin, are you able to say whether it is more likely than not to have contained arsenic from the testing that's been done?
But there was a test undertaken on scrapings that came out of the tin, and that was shown to contain a very significant concentration of arsenic.
We know that arsenic can be detected if it's been ingested in the body in a person's fingernails. Is that something that was present in this case or not?
Fingernails were analysed and arsenic was detected in them. Now, that's an interesting point, because fingernails grow quite slowly. It's about 1/3 of a centimetre a month. So that could suggest that arsenic had been ingested perhaps sometime beforehand.
Thank you very much. Having spoken to the toxicologist, it seems quite clear that this was a deliberate poisoning, the poison in question being arsenic, so cause of death has pretty much been locked down. I'm also interested in previous attempts at poisoning, which are suggested from the fingernail evidence. And although this is not conclusive, it dovetails with the previous bouts of what was considered at the time to be gastroenteritis, which now may well be attempts at poisoning. The tin evidence is much stronger than I originally thought. It's now clear that it contains large amounts of arsenic. So all in all, the toxicological evidence leads me to suggest that the prosecution case is stronger than I originally considered it to be.
On the question of the toxicologist, I have to accept as things stand that aspects of his evidence reinforce the probability that this was a deliberate case of poisoning. But, of course, that doesn't rule out Lucy Ostler or anybody else.
As David and William come to the end of their exploration of their family's story, they visit Charlotte's final resting place, Exeter Prison.
This is where my grandmother hung back in July 1936. She was also buried here in unconsecrated ground. And I think for me, this is going to be the most difficult part of the journey. And I'm absolutely sure it's going to be the most difficult part of the journey for my father.
There you are, Mum. I never knew you, love, but you'll always be with me. In my heart forever. I'll never forget you.
It's more emotional than I thought it was going to be. It's putting into context how times have changed in every respect, whether it be for 5 children that were left parentless, whether it was circumstantial evidence that's put together for a conviction and then a hanging and a burial in unconsecrated ground within the grounds of a prison. It's all a massive journey.
How would you say goodbye to somebody you never knew, but that you just, you know, just hold it in your heart and live with it. I love you, Mum. I didn't have much time with you.
I think he's suppressed lots of feelings for a very long time.
Give a kiss to Mum.
It's something that has been in our family that hasn't really been talked about. And let's hope that the findings come out that Charlotte was innocent and actually none of this needed to have happened.
Yeah.
With Judgment Day fast approaching, Jeremy has made a startling discovery. A detailed police report that shows that Lucy Ostler was interviewed at least half a dozen times, and that her statement changed significantly over time.
Well, Sasha, my concern is this, that I've seen a police report, and what that police report tells us is, quote, from the commencement, Mrs. Ostler was regarded with suspicion. By the 19th of January, it was still plain that she was holding something back. And I spent about 8 hours with her, and subsequently her demeanour changed, and her statement became, he says, spontaneous and convincing. There's a stench about this. Probably wouldn't even be admissible in the modern time, as you well know.
Oh,
if there was no
absolutely not.
record.
No,
wouldn't even see
absolutely
the
not.
light of day. So I don't agree that the jury were in a position to assess her evidence. In fact, they were in no position to assess her evidence because they didn't know about this scenario, it seems. My feeling about Charlotte Bryant's case is that it was a weak case, that she was the obvious suspect. She was illiterate, vulnerable, so she was ripe to be wrongly convicted.
At first blush, I thought this was quite a thin case, or that the prosecution evidence was not very substantial. We've now interviewed experts. I mean, I have to say my view has changed. We now know with some certainty that Fred Bryant died as a result of deliberate arsenic poisoning. I still am of the view that this was a circumstantial case, but I'm not sure from what I've seen that this is a miscarriage of justice.
Sasha and Jeremy have opposing arguments to put before Judge David Radford, who will give his view as to whether the original verdict was safe or unsafe. For William and David, however, this marks the end of a very personal look into their family's tragic past.
I was 35 when I first found out about this, so I'm really looking forward to hearing if there's anything new, and it would be a fantastic situation. We find out that Charlotte was innocent.
They can't overturn what's gone on before. I'll have to accept that. And I'm just hoping that the outcome will be a little different.
Judge David Radford will treat Jeremy and Sasha's submissions as he would a real case, and he will give his expert opinion based on the evidence.
We are here today so that I can consider the safety of the conviction of Mrs. Bryant for murder of her husband. Now, Mr. Dean, on behalf of the defence, do you wish to make submissions
Yes,
about the matter?
Your Honour, please. What has emerged in the course of this inquiry is a 54-page police report. Now, it's my submission that this material, evidently not available to the defence, shows that all of Lucy Ostler's statements were the product of unrecorded police questioning. Therefore, one will never know how her statements came about. Secondly, the vital weed killer tin statement of the 19th of January was the direct product of a whole day of unrecorded discussion with police. That's 8 hours. Thirdly, how is it, in the course of that 8-hour period, Lucy Ostler's statement changed completely? So, in conclusion, had this material been available to the jury's verdict might have been different. My submission is that there is a real risk that there has been a miscarriage of justice here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dean. Now, Miss Wass, you wish to respond?
Yes. Your Honour, may I take you back to the scientific evidence in this case, because we had the opportunity of taking advice from a toxicologist, and what has emerged is the following. Firstly, that the deceased died as a result of a deliberate ingestion of arsenic. Secondly, the tin that was so controversial did indeed contain quite large traces of arsenic. And the deceased's fingernails indicated that there had been previous episodes of arsenic poisoning. And most importantly, the jury saw Mrs. Ostler. They were able to assess her credibility. And contrary to what Mr. Dean has submitted, this was not cursory cross-examination. This was very forceful. So for those reasons, and with regret, we fundamentally disagree with the submissions made by Mr. Dean.
Thank you, Miss Ross. Well, I shall take time now to evaluate those submissions, and then shortly we'll give my judgment about the matter.
David and William are hoping the judge will agree with Jeremy's submission that Charlotte's conviction was unsafe. Did someone deliberately poison Fred Bryant? Was his wife the only suspect considered by police? Did the prosecution's key witness change her story under pressure? The judge is now ready to give his verdict.
I have now had an opportunity of considering the helpful submissions made by both leading counsel, and it is now my duty to make clear my view of this matter. The suspicion harboured by the police at the commencement in relation to Mrs. Ostler, the report itself goes on to say, was lessened as time went on because the information she did supply was capable of corroboration, and that her statement that she made was spontaneous and convincing. There is no evidence here of any lack of integrity by the police, so I've concluded that the disclosure really would not have assisted the defence in any proper and real way. Overall, this was undoubtedly a very strong case, in my view, against the defendant. It was, as it always is, a matter for the jury to determine where the truth lay and whether they were satisfied of the accused's guilt. They were so satisfied, and in my judgment, there is nothing now which properly, legally, could recommend to me to reinvestigate this conviction. I shall rise.
Today, even after reviewing the facts of the case, Jeremy is still struggling with the judge's opinion.
Sasha, I felt unhappy with Judge Radford's decision in Charlotte Bryant's case, and that remains my standpoint. My view is that where a main prosecution witness like Lucy Ostler is interviewed by the police and there's not one word of record as to what was said by the police, that's an unhappy state of affairs. And that's what makes me feel unsettled about Charlotte Bryant's conviction. And nothing has been brought to my attention to change my view.
Well, Jeremy, I wasn't surprised by the judgment. The only person who had the opportunity to consistently poison Frederick Bryant was Charlotte, because this had been poisoning over a long period, and Lucy Ostler did not have that opportunity.
William and David have travelled to London to meet the barristers. This is the first time they have met each other since the judgment.
We're really desperate, my father and myself, to talk to Sasha and Jeremy today and really understand the basis of the judge's decision, because we really feel that it wasn't the right decision.
And we'd like to bring them up to date on the latest that we've come across within the family.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Nice to
Hello,
see
Sasha.
you.
Hi, okay.
William,
Hello.
hello. Lovely to see you. Have a seat.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for coming. It's some time now since Judge Radford gave his judgment. What are your feelings about it?
We feel passionately that my grandmother wasn't guilty.
Are there any particular things that troubled you about the judgment?
Mother, she was illiterate.
Couldn't read and couldn't write. And, you know, in our minds, we're thinking, well, if that's the case, how would she administer poison and know the right amount to administer?
Obviously, if you gave too much,
Yes.
it would
It's
be
too
seen
obvious.
Immediately, too obvious. Just don't add up.
I think what we need to remember is that arsenic was used routinely in this era. Whether you actually need to read the label in order to use it, I'm not so sure.
I think the other thing that plays on our mind is that I'm still not convinced at all that there's a motive why my grandmother would murder my grandfather.
She had everything to lose. She had 5 children. Now, why throw all that away? It just doesn't make sense to me at all. I really can't believe that mother done such a thing to father.
It's really quite fascinating. You're almost keener now, following Judge Radford's judgment, to prove that Charlotte Bryant was innocent than you were before.
Yeah, I think we're more convinced now that there's a real doubt over her
Why
guilt.
is that? What is it that has happened?
I go back to Lucy
Ostler.
Yes. I'm sure there's more to her than was actually taken up.
I think the point you're interested in is whether Lucy Ostler was an alternative suspect.
Yes.
I think the problem that we had when we looked at that, or certainly I had, was that because there had been these previous attempts at poisoning Frederick with arsenic, those took place before Lucy Ostler even came on the scene, before she even knew the family, which didn't quite fit in.
If they were
with her.
attempts to
If
poison
they were
her,
attempts.
and not medical complications.
Exactly. I think what we'd really like to know is what's been happening since we last saw you.
You've had a great time, Dad, haven't you?
Elated, in fact, because we've met up with a lot of unknown relatives, uncles, aunts, cousins.
My father's gone from no direct relatives to probably 10 different people now, and it was all as a direct result of the programme.
Meeting family they never knew existed before has been life-changing for William and David. And this is the first time they are all coming together.
Hello, Julie. It's Bill speaking. I'm fine. Looking forward very much to seeing you. Well, to me, it's today, really, to put it in perspective. I was only 4 when this tragedy happened, and I never knew any of my family. Having nobody before, it's a case of feeling joyful and happy that we've now met and we can be a family again.
When William went into the orphanage, he lost contact with his entire extended family.
Hello. Hello. Hello, Phil. Hello, William.
It's such a shame if you look back over the years, what's happened 70 years ago. No one knew anybody existed, and since the programme, we've met lots of new family members. So today, for me, is fantastic. This is going to be the first opportunity that we get to bring them all together. Hi, Marvin. Roy, how are you? Good to see you again. And we'll be one big extended family that we've never had before.
It's not just William and David who feel they've gained a family. Julie Gibbs's dad was William's cousin. Trudy is her daughter. They've brought some family photos to show William.
This is Charlie, my dad. My dad used to play with your older siblings.
Yeah.
Dad used to go over the farm and played with them, so he was quite close to them.
Right,
This is your dad, Frederick, and that's my granddad.
right.
And these are your grandparents and my great-grandparents. You look a lot like him, actually, don't you? You do look like him.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel, William, seeing your grandparents?
Well, out of this world, actually. Never having known I had a family on mother or father's side. Only wishing that I could have seen them in the flesh. Yeah. So you were never told.
It was quite sad for Dad as well, because he lost all his family, that side of the family, you know, with his uncle and, of course, all of you cousins
Yeah.
growing up. So he missed out a lot as well. It's really sad.
Like, you know.
It was a shame, really, because Nan and Grandad didn't really want to talk about it, did they? So it was quite hard for us. It was very much kind of hush-hush, and so, you know,
I think it was too distressing for Dad.
Until recently, Julie didn't know any of the Bryant side of the family. But all that was about to change.
I was in like real shock when Trudy sent me the programme link and I watched it and I saw you and David on there. I was like, oh my goodness, there's my cousins there. I didn't know what to do. I was in such a fluff. I was just elated and I just cried my eyes out thinking, oh God, I've actually got a family out there. It was amazing.
Yeah. And it's been so nice meeting up with you anyway. And I thank you for contacting me.
And we get on.
Yeah.
It's just been lovely.
Another relation to make contact with William and David is Melvin Stroud. His grandfather was Frederick's cousin and a good friend of his. Melvin's been working on the family tree for many years.
As you gentlemen now know, I've been doing family history for the past sort of 15, 20 years, but I didn't realise until I saw you on the programme, on the television, that I had someone as close as you guys. And now I'm really thrilled that we've got the family together. That's my grandfather, and there's his first cousin, your father, your grandfather. And if I show you the family tree, there's myself with my mother, my father, and then if we move right across, we can see your father here, Frederick Bryant, and he married Charlotte. She was the firstborn, 1903. Sadie, Kathleen,
and Mary.
And then to Mary. And you've had a connection because Mary had Sheila.
That's right. I didn't even know who Sheila was. She phoned me, in actual fact. She said, I'm your cousin. I've just seen it all on television. She said,
wow.
Yeah.
That's
amazing.
lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she goes on about her brother, George. He's out in Australia.
Right.
So the next day I had an email from him saying, hello, cousin William. When are we going to see you? You know.
And there was you thinking you had a limited family. You've got them all over the world.
I've got them all over the world. That's right.
Absolutely.
I think what this does for me, Dad, is that before all we used to know really was you and your brothers and sister. Now, what it's done, it's really opened up the two families, isn't it? And we now know and understand lots more people.
Yeah,
so thank you very much for doing this.
No, I'm really thrilled, first and foremost, to have met you two.
Yeah.
Now, for the first time everyone has been reunited, David and William feel it's important for them to say a few words.
The difference a year makes. Certainly my father went through a real tough time when they started filming, and the result wasn't what we wanted. But I think what's come out of it is, a year later, is a whole group of people that we now know that we're directly related to. And it's so lovely knowing you. Thank you all very much for being here today.
Just want to thank you all for coming. It's nice to meet a part of a new family. I'm not much of a speech maker, but God bless you all.
Well, that's absolutely phenomenal that so many people have come forward and there's been such a positive angle to this tragic story. The whole episode must have just been the most remarkable experience for you.
A really strange journey, because we were excited on the way through. We were downbeat at the point that the judge said, no, she's guilty. And then out of nowhere, all these new family members came to us, and it's been absolutely superb, I have to say. And that's really made the whole journey worthwhile, hasn't it, Dad?
In a way, you can say that out of evil come good.
That aspect of the case is clearly a wonderful outcome for you both. But in terms of progress of the case, is it case closed as far as you're concerned?
We're definitely of the opinion that we think there's been a miscarriage of justice, and the end result of that is a travesty for all the family that is now living. And really, we're now asking what your advice would be for us to take this to the next stage.
My view is that the point that was discovered during the inquiry, which is that Lucy Osler was interviewed by the police for a long time in circumstances which we know very little about, and you could take that point to pursue an appeal, because there is a platform now for building on what's been discovered. So I encourage you to do just that.
I think it's just the beginning of us looking further into the case and see if there's any other opportunities that we can to be able to get to the point where it's a reconsidered verdict of not guilty.
I'll never believe that Mother's done it, and as far as I'm concerned, the case will never